So that was pretty cool. Hi, everyone. For all the familiar faces in the crowd, it's always lovely to see you. Welcome back. And to the new faces, if this is your first time, raise your hand. Welcome, welcome. What a wonderful event to make your first event. So thank you for coming. We do hope that you come back during our exhibition hours to take in the full exhibition and see you for other programs, perhaps. I would like to start this event by acknowledging that we are gathered together today on the unceded land of the Shinnecock, Montaukett, and Manhasset land. So may the respect that we have for the ancestral land and for each other be the way we move forward. I'm also very grateful to be working with the Reverend Haile here, and also just to be working on this exhibition itself. If you haven't taken it in, I highly recommend spending some time with it and learning. It is a great educational resource, and it's been an honor and a privilege to work on it and also to work on the programming with it. One of the things that resonated with me the most when I was working with Haile was this idea of disbanding fear through sharing knowledge and sharing understanding and sharing your resources. So I would like to deeply thank you for being here and sharing your story and your knowledge with us today. So thank you.
She taught me how to do that. First of all, thank you for being here. I appreciate that you've taken some time out of your day and your life to be here and share it with me. We are going to go over 13,000 years in 45 minutes. So put your seatbelts on. I want to say there are at least 1,500 ways to tell Shinnecock 101. So this is one story. This was one given me. That white is chalk and that green is a chalkboard. Are we all old enough to remember that? When my mom would do her Indian talks, she would go into the schools and she would write on the chalkboard, long ago, and then whatever year it was, 1967, 1972, whatever it was, on the other side of the chalkboard, so that the young people, required for all fourth graders in New York State, by the way, so she had a real affinity with them, but others as well, and it helped give them just a glimpse of an idea of what. Madeline, your seat is up front. It's my neighbor. So letting you know that there are many versions of this story, and we're going to try to keep it in a meditative form, because we're talking about real things, and real things are hard to live, they're hard to hear, but if we're going to get through this life, one moccasin in front of the other, we have to be ready. And it helps us the more that we know and the more that we open ourselves. The better things are for everybody. That's not a selfish thing, that's an everybody thing. So we'll begin. The two remaining pieces of my mother's voice are of her praying. And she's been gone 10 years. And as I'm putting this together, I'm saying I hear my mom's voice and she's praying, as I've heard for the past 65 years. So let's join our minds and begin.
Each day rise and give thanks. Pray while the sun rises in the eastern sky. Each day return appreciation, for we have been given many gifts. To each journey, offer your best. Pray while the sun shines bright on all creation. Each voyage gives you greater regard for doing everything that you can do. To each challenge, give acceptance. Work and pray while the earth turns another day. Let each person return thanks, for we do not know why things are as they are. We are only given signs to guide us on our way. Great Spirit watches over us. We are not alone. Flying Eagle Woman, we are thankful for your courage, for your prayers, for loving all things, for the life of honor that you have lived. You fly upon the path of your prayers. Each day, rise and give thanks. We pray while the sun rises in the eastern sky. Each day we return appreciation, for we have been given many wonderful gifts. Rise above my enemy upon the smoke.
Of all the people of the earth, my mom used to say, here, I was born a Shinnecock. And that can make you laugh or it can make you cry, but it has to do with who we are and the place where we are. She would arrive in street clothes so that when she dressed in her deerskin, the young people would be able to see that she doesn't wear that every day. She wears street clothes every day. How we've had to adapt to live in this world. Weedamo, Denise Silva Dennis, is one of the artists whose beautiful artwork. I'm in front of her Sugarloaf Hill. When they put me here in the gallery, I said, wonderful, I want Sugarloaf over my shoulder. This is Shinnecock 101 because it is at the playground and the children can get in the swing and they swing back and forth. And look, children, this is your wonderful world. It's a playground, just a little aside, put in a spot where one of the tribal leaders said there'll never be a playground here. So put that in your back pocket. I'm not going to unpack that, but draw your own conclusions. And it shows how our life was. The whale, the houses, the women, and the corn in the garden. Traditional life. So that was long ago life, depicted for the young people today. This you will recognize as Long Island. You will recognize 13 territories. You will recognize that each of the territories, there's room to sit. You'll recognize that each of the territories has woodland And each of the territories has water. So there's waterfront. So fishing and living from the beautiful water that we're trying to protect now. And each had hunting grounds. And importantly, I consider them like clans because it tells you who to marry and who not to marry. So that becomes important in everybody's world at a certain time. Just this week, we were at a conference about land, Land A. No, where were we, Wiedemo? Land Alliance for, thank you, Land Trust Alliance. You know, those senior moments. We were at the Land Trust Alliance, and part of what was used as our program there, talking about living people side by side with the land in peace together, was the two-row wampum belt. And I trust that you all recognize this. This is 400 years old plus. It is an agreement in wampum, which means it's very serious, it's life and death. But it was a very early agreement as to how the native people would live with the Dutch, side by side. And you don't see one of the wampum rows crossing over into the other. You see that everyone has enough in their vessel on the river of life and how to live together. Our people knew how to live together in peace. One of the first things that outsiders, when telling about Indians, all these wars, I think what is most remarkable about Native people is that they had many ways to live in peace together. And in this world today, I don't know who else can say that. This is one of the peace symbols. This is one of the peace symbols. Up front, we have the Hiawatha belt. It's the Six Nations belt. I'm holding that up because someone just asked that they'd never seen it before, and they're in education. They're in a field of education. You need to know what this is. And this is the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee people living side by side in peace. This wasn't part of my talk, but we claim very much knowledge of it because the wampum is from the shells of the Shinnecock people. But what it shows, that tree in the middle, the first draft of the Constitution, is what got that teacher's attention just now. And it's very much deeper than the first draft of the Constitution, because what makes this lasting, and it's very, very old and it's still intact, you would see Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, living in peace together. And the white roots of peace of the white pine, this is a peace tree. And it's a peace tree because they agreed that underneath that tree, they would bury their weapons. Bury their weapons. And my mom said the roots grow through the weapons and render them inoperable. And so you can't make a society of peace unless you're committed. Burying the weapons. You can't, what do you, get pissed off, go home and get a weapon and come back and do something crazy. That is how we lived in peace together. And if that's all we got out of Shinnecock 101, that'd be great. We see here, they call a cottage. I put it in quotes. That's not long ago. That's modern. You'll recognize the characters from Wiedemo's mural there, living in peace with Mother Earth. and it was matriarchal. And we can see this has upset all kinds of the natural world. There's masonry, and there's mulch, and there's all kinds of disturbance to Mother Earth there. And I don't even want to talk about the price of that. You notice we talked about wampum, we didn't say anything about money, because wampum is more valuable than money because it's an agreement. An agreement of peace is more valuable than money. I don't know if I get on a list for saying that today, but I believe that it is true, and our people knew that it was true. The roles of our people long ago, everyone taking part. This depicts, and this is the mural from when our museum was opened, and David Bunn-Martin made big panels depicting Shinnecock life in the long ago. And just recently, I think it's the third canoe, or Mishoon, was burnt and created on Shinnecock. Last month, I think it was in April, the young people went down to the powwow grounds, and in the traditional way, and very slowly and very carefully, burnt the dugout canoe, because that was an important part of our life. I'm going to put on another song to help us. I won't play the whole thing, though, because ours was a matriarchal society. The women's role included protecting land. The women's roles included being overseeing the garden, and so there was a place for everyone. There were no such things as orphans in a society where your mothers are your mothers, and your aunties are your mothers, and your grandma is your grandma, but all her sisters are your grandmas. What a wonderful way to know who you are and where you belong. And there was no such thing as being an orphan or being homeless. And I have to share with you one of the early stratagem, let's just call it that, because that's the way to say tricky strategy, is a stratagem, because you gotta keep making them worse until you get what you want. But one of the stratagem of the English was a 5-step plan. And I got emotional when I was typing this 3 days ago. But that's why I wanted us to be in a meditative state, so that we're talking about real things and we're hearing things that perhaps we did not know before, but certainly things that might help you know why Shinnecock 101 is not widely taught or shared. It's been mostly denied and ignored these 380 plus years. I'm reading from Dr. Gaynell Stone's work. And she said, documented strategies used by the English throughout New England during the 17th century to divest Indians of their lands. And then she quotes another source that she makes reference to. In summary, they are as follows. Number 1, find or create a puppet sachem. Find an Indian with a claim to leadership, no matter how tenuous. Help him build up his following among local Indians by giving him money and goods to distribute, and provide him with military support from time to time when his claim to leadership is challenged by other Indians. Once this has been accomplished, this Indian can be established as Lord of the lands, with the authority to sign away lands of all the Indians in the area. On Long Island, this strategy included the imposition of a fictional and arbitrary tribal system on the small hunting and gathering bands and the designation of equally fictional tribal boundary lines. Step 2, confuse and seduce with alcohol. Take advantage of the cultural disarray which followed the breakdown of cultural mores by using alcohol to ease the process of negotiations. Step 3, intimidate by armed force. Opportunities for such actions always followed incidents, such as an act of violence by an individual or a small group of Indians. The troops would visit the Indian community and force a land concession or further compromise local Indian autonomy with additional regulations. Step 4, harass the Indians with continual pressures from the private sector. The following techniques were most commonly used. Livestock was allowed to roam through Indian fields, destroying their crops. Whites would begin to cut hay or wood on Indian land, and some even went so far as to plow, plant, and even to settle on the edges of Indian land, testing boundary definitions which were always very vaguely defined in the deeds. And step 5, force the Indian into debt and take land as payment. A favorite strategy in New England and on Long Island was to impose fines to a long list of offenses which ranged from individual acts of violence to the observation of native religious ceremonies. When these fines could not be paid, land was seized as compensation. So there's your 5 steps. They are cruel, they are violent, they are disingenuous at the very least, and they are outright criminal if spiritual standards or legal standards were applied equally to Native people who were not considered human beings. We see the imposition of the trustee system in 1792, and that resembles this stratagem. Get them drunk and manipulate them. Have your way with them. It is crass and it is base, but it's an accurate way to interpret these methods of deception and coercion. Intimidation from the private sector, like the public hearing at Town Hall on the 19th of December, where fewer than a dozen residents near our Shinnecock West Woods have gone so far as to settle on our land, testing the boundaries. And in the hearing, they speak against Shinnecock people because, and I quote, Indians aren't supposed to cut down trees. It's okay for them to dress up and dance at the powwow, but it's not okay for us to presume to utilize part of our own land that we've somehow managed to be allowed to keep. There were more than 40 Shinnecocks in that hearing that day, and the board rushed to decide to sue Shinnecock leadership for acting in their legal, official capacity a week before Christmas. I just throw that in. Written and recorded, bold as brass. High atop Sugarloaf Hill, when you stand looking south on Sugarloaf Hill, you can see the Shinnecock Bay. You can see the barrier island. You can see the ocean. And somehow the ocean looks higher than the bay and the dune road. And our people would stand there, and if they spied the blow spouts of whales who migrated twice a year, then the Podawee, our traditional whaling, began. And I describe that scene so perfectly because I heard it all my life. And it wasn't until I was 60 that I was allowed to stand on that hill and look south and see the Shinnecock Bay and the barrier island, and where my people would look to see if the whaling would begin. You've heard of payment in rum. They spelled rum R-H-U-M. All right, we're in Sag Harbor, where I don't even have to exaggerate to you the wealth that was generated from whaling. Any street that we go down, Captain so-and-so, this man owned boats. Well, see, the bigger house, he owned more boats. And so we talk about the generational wealth that has been created for some through whaling. At the same time, for Shinnecocks, the generational poverty supported by whaling. Sometimes, I worked over in the Whaling Museum for 5 years, and sometimes the whalemen would leave the ship after a 2-year voyage and owe the company money. Now, how in the world are you to survive? Certainly, by design, all of these things happen. And when natives tried to organize, they were not allowed to do so. But it was phrased in this way: there was a time when not a ship left the port without one Shinnecock man on board to guide it. That sounds romantic, and it sounds just lovely. And what it really meant is you could not organize, you could not make any unions or agreements or advocate so that you might be able to make enough to live on after your 2 years of work on the whaling ship. Long ago, ancient trade routes are why we see copper painted in a lot of David Bun Martin's papers on his pictures. And it was respect for women, and it was on the water, respect for water. It was in the land, respect for land. 13,000 years ago. And then we have corn, beans, and squash. Women in the garden. The women hold the garden. Traditional planting deters weeds and pests, and the corn and the beans and the squash grow and help each other under the soil. I can't tell you the biology, but it's there. and they help each other grow above the soil because the tall sister, the corn, allows the beans to grow around her, and then the squash protects the roots. So these are the things. I marked on some of my slides a big blue 101. And when I did that, those were things that I wanted to be reminding myself that are absolutely Shinnecock. The Shinnecock scrub, there on the end, that is absolutely Shinnecock. I've been to many nations, and never have I seen something like that. And my husband and I were at a UN meeting a year ago, and the head of the Native Committee had forgotten her talking stick. And she said to us around the table, is there anyone who has something that's very special that we could use as the talking stick? And I had my grandfather's Shinnecock scrub. And there were natives from Canada, and there were indigenous people from US and South and Central America and other places in the world too. And as I held up the Shinnecock scrub, I said, do any of you know or have any of you ever seen this? And only one man at the table, he was a Cherokee, Black Fox. He had seen a scrub and heard of a Shinnecock scrub. So if there's a final, this will be on the final. Shinnecock 101, a scrub. This is one that Chief Red Fox, my grandfather's cousin, made for him. And I carry it in my car to have it with me always. The wampum, the quahog, the purple, the white, the beads, absolutely Shinnecock. There is at the top a wooden doll. We have very little interaction with wooden dolls. The only one I can remember is of the Delaware people who, to whom we are related. And the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia had gotten a hold of one, and they shouldn't have, but they did. And back in 1993, they called Delaware people together, and they gave the doll back so that they could bless it and take it where it was supposed to be and not locked up in the church archives where it wasn't supposed to be. This is a depiction of June meeting. June meeting in the Shinnecock Hills. Up and down the coast, visitors came to see us. It is known as our Strawberry Thanksgiving. It's welcoming the flowers. It's giving thanks when the corn that you have just planted has grown to the size of a squirrel's ear. And then you have Thanksgiving. This will be on the 1st of June this year. And until 1859, it had always been in the Shinnecock Hills. But since we were able to, with Peconic Land Trust, gain access to Sugarloaf Hill again and other parcels that have been preserved, we have June meeting once again. This will be the 5th year that we have it back in our Shinnecock Hills. For those of you who know Samson Occam, we won't talk about him much today, a little bit, but he used to write about coming to Shinnecock for June meeting. And we know that our neighbors and Narragansetts and Mohegans and all across the Sound, because you hop in a boat, you're going to end up somewhere even if you don't have a motor. This depiction is Mananacut, and in the middle is a clan mother, and on the end is Massasoit. Massasoit stands in Plymouth Harbor. Haba, Plymouth Haba. They say it different in Massachusetts. And he's a real tall bronze. And then the clan mother, of course, among our Haudenosaunee sisters and brothers, are the ones who can choose the chiefs. They've seen all these young men grow up. They know who might be a good chief. They know who might not be a good chief. And they also have the mechanism, the authority to invite chiefs and to uninvite chiefs. And I've always thought of this is one of David's pictures, I always thought of him as Noah Donna. It's not, it's Manataka, so that's a whole other thing, but it was 380 years ago, so I ask your forgiveness for that. Shinnecock 101, for conscience sake, we're on dry land. Well, I'm going to have us join our meditation and play 10 slides with music. And then we're going to go back and look at those 10 slides with the information that comes to us.
In the name of your Jesus, you came by the boatload, proclaiming he showed you the way, preaching fire and brimstone, hell and damnation, preaching Jesus commands you obey. Jesus, sweet Jesus, did you really tell them to murder my grandma that way? They called her a sinner, 'cause they couldn't win her, and she drowned in her blood where she lay. In the name of your Jesus, 10,000 of thousands of Christians arrived on our shores. They came waving Bibles and crosses and rifles, building churches on Indian graves. Jesus, sweet Jesus, did you really tell them to murder my mother that way? They called her a sinner, 'cause they couldn't win her, and she drowned in her blood where she lay. Jesus, sweet Jesus, did you really tell them to murder my brother that way? They called him a heathen, a savage, then shot him, and he drowned in his blood where he lay.
Hakame is one of the words that survives in the Shinnecock language that is spoken daily, which is very odd because that's the word that got us in trouble. It means welcome. And it's not casual like hiya. It means welcome, you are here, so some of what is here must be for you because you need to eat. Some of where to live must be for you because you need a place to live. It's the human thing to do, and it's honoring humanity. I like this depiction because it's factual in that height of the Native people was a factor. They say the Narragansetts were very tall. They say the Shinnecock, even Shinnecock women today are pretty tall. The Montaukets walked as stately as kings, and so the settlers called them Pharaoh. So I like this picture because Anawan is towering over that guy, and that guy historically is not telling the truth. Indian preacher, Priest Paul Cuffey, you will notice that his grave is right on Montauk Highway. And people think, oh, as they drive by, oh, that old Indian, wonder why he's buried there all by himself. Well, he's not buried there all by himself. He was in the churchyard, where a lot of people are buried. But the railroad came through, 1859. You will see they make reference to Samsamacum here. And just for the Presbyterian buffs, Samsamacum, the Mohegan, came to June meeting often, came to Montauk, so much so that he married a Montaukett woman. And he was ordained in 1759 in the East Hampton Presbyterian Church. And he was the first Native American ordained in our denomination. And then, a couple centuries later, I was ordained in the denomination as the first Native American woman. They wouldn't pay him, they wouldn't hire him, his family went hungry. I won't say that about myself other than I've not had a salary in the Presbyterian Church. I don't have a pension in the Presbyterian Church. So maybe things didn't change over these 300 years. This wonderful, wonderful, this picture, I could look at this picture for years. You see Weedamo there. You see her mural in the background. This is the Sisters of St. Joseph Villa in good ground in Shinnecock territory, but the Sisters of St. Joseph are opening themselves to the Shinnecock people. Certainly Shinnecock women who are the kelp farmers have received an invitation, and they are about that important, important work right now. And in this mural, Weedamo, I'm glad I didn't see you on that scaffolding. I don't think I could have dared to see her on scaffolding. It would have made me much too nervous. But when she unveiled this, we see the horse-drawn church that when we were relegated to the neck, kicked out of our Shinnecock Hills, the Shinnecock Bay was fresh water until 1938, so it froze. And so they dragged part of one of Priest Paul's chapels across on the ice, put it on the neck, East Gate, West Gate, and now you people never have to leave. That church building is still there. I mentioned that hurricane of 38. When the waters came up in that very violent storm, and when the waters receded, it dislodged the church from its foundation and turned it to now face the south. So our people left it that way. It's still that way today. But this was the church that was brought over on the ice. And then the front part with the red door you see, that's the new sanctuary. New meaning 1939. And our people sang and danced and were allowed to dress in traditional clothing to raise money for the new sanctuary in 1939. And these were pageants. I believe that's Reverend Case. I was not around, but I do believe that's who that minister is, and I think he had something to do with Bridgehampton Church. And it's, well, I don't need to say that. This is the Priest Paul Cuffey Chapel that remains in Canoe Place. The chapel was moved about a block in 2015. The Community Preservation Fund had something to do with that. But we still have never been told where are the gravestones that were on the graves. I have seen both sets of the gravestones, the old ones, and then at some point in history before they moved the church in 2015, there was a new set of gravestones, and we have seen them. Henry Moeller from Hampton Bays was very instrumental in that. In this 1939 pageants, Mr. Leuben Hunter played Priest Paul Cuffey. So they said, he is not in this picture, but there's a series of pictures. You'll see a tall man, and that's Leuben Hunter. And you may know Roberta, his daughter, who lived in Sag Harbor for many years. And you may know that Mr. Leuben lived to 105 years old. So I say that he played Priest Paul Cuffey. Why can't my nephew Samqui play Priest Paul Cuffey? He danced on Off-Broadway this year, so I put him up there. Because where else would Priest Paul be but looking over his people, looking over his chapel? And that chapel, the Shinnecock photographer who was trying to document its relocation was chased away by town officials, and my mom had to get on the phone in her hospital bed to tell them that Matt is going to take pictures of this. He is going to document it. He has more right to that chapel than you do because he is a descendant of Priest Paul Cuffey. And then Matt and his dear wife, Tila, were married in that church in May of last year. And that sounds so easy and simple, except the town official's son didn't have obstacles placed before him when he wanted to be married in that chapel. But when two Shinnecocks wanted to be married in that chapel, it just was the hardest thing for the town to figure out. And they were charged an exorbitant amount of money. And weeks later, a fence was put up across the front of that chapel. I can take a hint. This, of course, is prior to 2021. If we held a moment of silence for each child who died in residential school or boarding school, then we would be silent for more than 13 years. Our tribal chairwoman, Lisa Goree, her grandmother is a survivor of Thomas Indian School. And it was U.S. policy, it was the law of the land to send Native people to these boarding schools. In 2021 is when Kamloops in British Columbia was found to have on its school grounds undocumented burials of children. To the far is Justine Kellis, a survivor of Carlisle Indian School, in Pennsylvania. She and her brother went. And here, second from the left, is Sis Randall at Thomas Indian School. Not one happy face among them. And the justification for the residential schools was that they must civilize the native people. And when there's a school on the reserve, the child lives with their parents, and the child's parents are savages. So the child is surrounded by savages, and he may learn to read and write, but his habits and training and his mode will be of Indians. I'm quoting. This is going to be hard because if we want to civilize them, we must separate them from their parents during the time that they are being taught. Otherwise, you will have simply a savage who can read and write. And may I claim to be a savage who can read and write. This unspeakable sight is the graveyard at Carlisle Indian School. How in the world do you take the care of children and have to have a cemetery on your school property and the indignity of being buried under unknown? That child had parents and grandparents and a nation and a world. And these are the things that happen to Native people. I've stood at the graves of 3 Beeman children at Thomas Indian School in Cattaraugus. See the corner, in the color picture of black, the others are black and white, and the one that's in color. That's Reverend Sidbird. Look him up on YouTube. You will hear him telling the stories of how at 6 years old he was taken and put into a boarding school. And he told that story all his life. He lived till he was 97. And he was a friend of mine. He came to Shinnecock. When he came to Long Island, I picked him up from the airport. We're driving, and we go by the sign on the LIE that says Great Neck. He says, "Oh, that where the Shinnecocks make out?" And I thought it was a pretty funny thing for him to say. But he tells the story, so I advise you, take that down, look him up on YouTube. Also, just another Sag Harbor moment is Mrs. Russell Sage, in her book, talks about sending financial support to the Carlisle Indian School. So these things are not far away and for somebody else. They are here. They are Shinnecock 101. They are absolutely Shinnecock. At Ma's house, Jeremy was able to speak to someone who had curated a Thomas Indian School exhibition, and they made a deal, and that exhibition came to Ma's house. And it was the first time ever that our community was able to talk about the boarding school experience that had happened to our elders. We were able to see the Thomas Indian School collection, and then we were able to add a Shinnecock chapter to that exhibit. Little pencil letters back home. And then the Circassian. I'm just going to play a little from that. The 10 men are buried on the Shinnecock Cemetery, where the sunset meets the shore. This is not on? Oh, that one's on? Oh, okay, this one I gotta swallow, huh? And it's something that, once again, absolutely Shinnecock. What is the devastation of fewer than 10 families? They say there were 100 people. So I'm gonna say that's 10 families, maybe 12 families, who had gone in 1859, relegated to the neck. This is 1876. And it was the swamp. There were no trees growing there, so we had to cut firewood at West Woods. Our West Woods, that's west of Shinnecock, and it's woods because it's our firewood supply because we were relegated to the neck. So it's not the West Woods of the people who are making a big deal at this moment. It is our West Woods. And 17 years after our being relegated to the neck, the whaling had already, they'd exploited the oceans until the whale was nearly extinct. And so where are the seamen to go? And they're hired out for this very dangerous work. And it devastated our community. So we talked about 13,000 years, we talked about 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. Now 1900s I remember. So who are we now and what are we now? They've been saying the last of the Shinnecocks for the past 300 years. You'll notice in our seal, the Shinnecock scrub is prominent. The Native woman is holding that scrub. It's so important to who we are and where we live that it's inscribed that way. So in 1946, we answered who we are and what we would be doing, because Thunderbird had a vision, and Princess Nowadonna and other cousins and women of the church who can cook soup. Whenever you need some soup, they will cook it for you. Clam chowder and succotash, none better. And World War II had ended, and the young men coming home from the service. And the vision that my grandfather had was preserve those old ways and celebrate them and sing and dance. And so he got Indians from across the water, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, bunch of iron workers in Manhattan. They get Labor Day off. So that was one of the things that I said to Harry when I first met him. I said, oh, I've been smiling at Mohawk men for a long time. Come out to Shinnecock and sing and dance on Native land. It has been called the largest gathering of Natives east of the Mississippi. Absolutely Shinnecock on the final exam. I think it also is the time then to say, because that's Uncle Louie dancing, Hopi, Ho-Chunk, who has come to every powwow for 79 years. And some of his family came and stayed. So when I have a Hopi woman at the very end, it's because I have nieces and nephews who are Hopi and Shinnecock. And we will also find that there are young people in our community who are Navajo and Shinnecock. And then in the middle, that's supposed to be, it's different than Ho-Chunk ribbon work, because that's a Muskogee Cree. But those two women in the middle there, the Muskogee Cree and Seminole, We do a lot with the Seminole people. We have a Shinnecock young man who's an attorney who works, I think he runs the Hard Rock Cafe for the Miccosukee in Florida. And then, of course, this is a Haudenosaunee woman, and that cloth that she is wearing is treaty cloth. Treaty cloth from a Canandaigua treaty. Every year, George Washington's agreement is still enforced, and Haudenosaunee people go and get bolts of calico material because that agreement was insisted upon staying alive, and so that dress. And I'll just hold up two more, I won't say anything about them. And then on the end in the deerskin is our Shinnecock with wampum and beadwork and fringes and ermine hair ties and some fur and a beaded pocketbook. Let's see, can anything else go on? Not quite, we're still standing straight. Maybe we need another necklace. Traditional Shinnecock corn dance, 101, absolutely Shinnecock. The dancers here are the Lord's Prayer dancers. And when COVID came, we did not cancel powwow. We had our community distancing, social distancing powwow. And we had the young women dance on a video so that those of us who couldn't gather could watch that. They're honoring the murdered and missing Indigenous people. By now we say MMIP because it was missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirits. And, well, Shanae was here last week. She's down here singing in the corner. And then somebody did a little editing of the Southampton Village sign. And before it was changed back, someone took a picture and sent it to me. It was wonderful. But you see, you have much more of a context. Even now, spending an hour with me, you have much more of a context as to why it's possibly true that a young person from our community has really had it. We have had it. And yet, Hakame. I'm just going to smile. My mom, Cousin Kita, Cousin Quanta. And I'm going to talk about the monuments. I was at a Native American Consulting Committee meeting in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're sitting around the table waiting people to come in from the Dakotas, and someone come from Oklahoma, and Charlotte was coming from Arizona, and she came in just getting there from the airplane and put her bags on the table. She said, I heard about a tribe who's building signs on their own land, she said, and they're getting trouble. She said, on their own land. She said it like 3 times. She just couldn't get over the story. I said, Charlotte, that's my community. On our own land. She just threw her head back. She had never heard of such a thing. It is not absolutely Shinnecock to have invented billboards for the highway. We're not going to take credit for that. I defy anyone, however, to justify why we may not have our billboards on a highway that bisects our land without an easement. Some things you just got to let them sink in. Without an easement. Sounds pretty illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't sound right. Our monuments, once again, Hakame, we're welcoming people to our territory. And in our territory, graves are desecrated regularly. Why should we sit by the side of a road? Because our cemeteries and our ancestors are going to be desecrated, removed from the ground, so that there can be yet another mansion. They're not even homes. I had a Shinnecock teenager helping me, and I took her home because kids can only work so long on a Saturday, you know. But she just said, how come they have to have a big old house like that? That doesn't even make sense, she said. All right, she's 14, what does she know? She knows everything, that's exactly right. And so, New York State, of course, has us in court right now over our monuments and over, which are the billboards on the highway, and over the gas station on the highway. Oh, I forgot, Travel Plaza. Where should we put it? On the highway? Desecration of sacred land. Spiritual people know how to survive. And that is one of the reasons that we remain, because it's not physically possible to live when the flood is coming. What are we going to do? The floods are coming. What is the answer? We have to learn to live underwater. And so we have been learning to live underwater as Shinnecock people. But we are still here, and we have not disappeared, and we haven't any plans to do so. And please notice, as I said the last time I addressed the town board, we are not telling you to go back where you came from. We have not said that. This was Hawthorne Road. This ancestor came up out of the ground while there were 1,000 Indians at the Shinnecock powwow. And so we all went over to the hills where once again a grave had been disturbed. And then to add insult to the injury, the officials and the law enforcement, oh, stand back. This might be a crime scene. It might be a South American gang of a M13. That's what this might be. Stop. It's a 1,000-year-old grave that you have desecrated. You're in a cemetery. That's what the Shinnecock Hills have been, our cemetery. All right, I'm going to finish. Praying, very important. Our spiritual connection, very important to each other as people, to our neighbors, neighboring nations and non-natives, and to our land. Our DNA is in this land. This is our land. And this is the land that takes care of us. Because it wasn't the church taking care of us, and it wasn't our neighbors taking care of us. It was the land taking care of us. Doctrine of Discovery, please look it up. You'll read for days. All the churches have come out against the doctrine of discovery, and yet New York State and the town of Southampton base their challenge of the Shinnecock people's right to use our own land on the doctrine of discovery. The papal bull from the 1400s that says Indigenous people have only the right to occupy land like a deer or a rabbit, and that they don't have the right to have title to that land. And if a monarch related to Christianity and their explorers come over to that shore, they can do what they will to the people. And that means bind you up and sell you into slavery, and it means take your land and all kinds of genocidal practices. I don't know. Doesn't sound quite right to me. I will play this one because then I have to have Q&A and I have to be quiet. Can you hear it?
Wise one, tell me what your eyes have seen. You have seen our people sad, being robbed of all they have. You have seen the old-time faces. You have seen that sacred place. You have seen through tears and time. Your eyes have seen much more than mine.
I want to give credit where it is due to all the artists whose beautiful artwork I have used, wonderful faces. The dog ate my bibliography, but I will have one. And please look at the resources that I brought here. The young people don't write it down, they take a picture of it. So please take a picture of these books and read these books. And I'm going to thank you for your kind attention, and now I'm going to be quiet.
Thank you, Holly. And on the contrary, we would like you to keep talking. We would just like to maybe have you answer some questions. Are there any questions in the audience? Cool, give me 1 minute to just get over there with the microphone. Yeah.
The scrub. The name implies a use of, and the way it looks, that you might be washing dishes with it, and yet later on it had much more significance than that. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, it's named scrub because it's made of scrub oak. So that's the first thing.
Thank you.
But it is used to scrub, but it's made of scrub oak. I don't know, is that an Indian pun? It could be, I suppose. Because you use it, and then as the bristles wear down, and then you get your husband to cut some more. I'd cut my fingers off. I had to make a scrub. And then when you're way down to here, then you throw it in the fire, and then it'll keep you warm. So there you go.
We have one back here.
Thank you very much for bringing forth all of this energy and information and a lot of food for thought. And I had a few weeks ago found out about this lawsuit with against the Westwoods. And I called the town of Southampton, because I live here in Sag Harbor, and told them I wanted to be sure that none of my tax dollars were being used for attorneys to do this atrocity to our neighbors. And they told me there was nothing I could do about it. And I'm wondering, is there something we can do about it? I know on June 1st we have to pay the second half of our taxes, and I want to know how much of that is being harvested towards these attorneys of $3 million or whatever. I have to fact check. How can those of us who do not want to support this keep our tax dollars from going to these attorneys? Is there any community action or anything being instigated or that we can do?
Well, I thank you very much for that. And I'm going to give you kind of a scatter answer. But an Onondaga man reminded me 3 days ago at the Land Trust Alliance that the reason that we depend on our allies is because we don't cross over. We're not supposed to. We've gone to the town board, doesn't do any good to cross over, only when they're crossing over into our lane. But I want to say that you have much more influence than you may think. There's a woman among us whom I met one time, and she wrote to politicians on behalf of the Shinnecock, and one of those politicians picked up the phone and called her the same day. Now that's juice. You guys got juice. I'm trying to say that they can ignore a room full of 40 Shinnecocks, but one woman wrote one letter and the politician picked up the phone and called her. So I'm asking you to make as much noise as you can. All over New York State, we have the other 9 nations standing with us. We are trying to say that this doctrine of discovery and the things that they are basing this on is not legal and it's not moral, and whoever's making those decisions in the court, they sit in some church tomorrow morning, or maybe they went to temple today, I don't know, but they believe in something, and they need to believe in their human neighbors and what they are doing to finish off all of these genocidal practices that have been going on for 384 years, and it'll be 385 years on the 12th of June in 3 weeks. Thank you. Please make noise. All the politicians, all of them, all of your churches. Methodist Church has made a commitment to the act of repentance. That was in 2012 when they denounced the doctrine of discovery, and part of their act of repentance has been put into their church discipline, much braver than the Presbyterians. But they put it in their church discipline so they can't get around it. And they have to reach out to Native neighbors and learn about this history and their part in this history. And I quote William Apis. He was a Pequot minister just after Samsamacum. So 1750, early 1800s. And he said, there's 2 things that our neighbors need to know. There's guilt, and then there's responsibility. We're not talking about guilt. We're talking about responsibility, because we are the generation who can do something about this. We can't undo, but we can make changes now. And this is the richest community in the world. And, I need 2 hands for this. And you've heard people say, well, if money were no object, what would you do? Well, we live in a place where money is no object. So theoretically, we could do anything we want to do. And why couldn't this wealthy community say that the water is going to lift all the boats? And the wrongs of the past need to be righted. Do my grandchildren have to stand by the side of the road? I don't want them to stand by the side of the road with a sign. I want them to live their life, but I don't want them to be in poverty. 61% poverty on the Shinnecock Reservation right now, 2025. Not long ago, we didn't have poverty. Everybody had enough to eat. Everybody had a place to live. Everybody knew who they were. And now in 2025, we have 61% poverty. Thank you. I encourage you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Thank you. Please come and look at all the things. Thank you.